Man, it's looking like the late 1990s and early 2000s with the 24 car dominating at tracks like Watkins Glen and winning at tracks like Darlington. William Byron extended his series leading wins amount. He had 4 entering today. He now has 5 as he won at Watkins Glen, dominated, led like 65 laps of this race. As for his teammate Chase Elliott, who's hoping to make the playoffs but has to win, it's Elliott over, as the meme says. Technically, he is not eliminated yet, but he has to win at Daytona next week. And he has never won at Daytona, so we will see. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But William Byron picking up his 5th win of the year. Was able to get the lead on that first pit cycle, second pit cycle, one of those pit stops where him, McDowell, Hamlin, Ty Gibbs were all kind of in the same group. And they had the first or second pit stop because Hamlin opted to go for the back of the pit lane to have a flatter surface. But William Byron was the first off of pit road. That pit crew's been insane this year. They got control of the race and they never let it go. Byron led essentially the last 65 laps, I think, now that I think about it. But really, I mean, he really did just dominate this race. Once he got control of it, he never gave it back up. They led by over a second. They won it probably by 2 or 3 seconds there at the end. Never really had a ton of pressure, but was able to hold on. William Byron, a really good car all weekend long. Practice time was fast, qualified on the front row, and of course, won the race. This is the second straight race we've had with only 1 caution. Of course, stage cautions have been eliminated since the beginning of the year. Well, last week we had a caution on lap 2 at Indianapolis due to a crash. This year, this week, I should say, we only had 1 caution as well. So 2 straight races with 1 caution. But what was that 1 caution? Chase Elliott had to win to make the playoffs. And Watkins Glen is statistically one of his best tracks. He has 2 wins at the track. He's finished top 5 the last 4 races there. It was looking like this would be the week that it could potentially happen. He was a heavy favorite in terms of odds. Everyone was talking about him. Everyone thought this was going to be the week that he was going to win this week. Then he qualified 15th, and that was the first setback. Watkins Glen, especially in the next-gen car, it's a track position race. Road courses without stage cautions, you need that track position because there's no guarantee of a yellow. And other than that, you'd be playing strategy. Well, Chase Elliott, a bad qualifying effort, put him in 15th, meaning he'd have to make up positions. Made his way up to 13th that first run, just couldn't make the passes he needed to. But then a good strategy call by Alan Gustafson. We will talk about his other strategy call later. He ends up making that strategy call, pits him a lap or 2 earlier than the guys in front of him, and they make up 6 spots after that first pit cycle. So really good call, really good, start to the race. But of course, because they pitted a few laps earlier than everyone else, the tires start to fall off. They fall under pressure from Kyle Busch, lose a couple of positions. They're about 9th, 10th, better, but at the same time, they're going to need a caution realistically to be in contention for this thing. He had been running competitive lap times, but he needed a caution to have any shot at the win. He was 20 plus seconds back off the leader. There was no way he was winning this thing under green. Then on about lap 54, 55, that's about when everyone was going to make their last pit stop, Chase Elliott runs out of fuel. You heard me right. Lap 55 of 90, Chase Elliott ran out of fuel. You hear about guys in fuel mileage races running out of fuel, at the end of the race, 2 to go, 3 to go, last lap, whatever it may be. And that's happened at Watkins Glen before, where we've had fuel mileage races. But on lap 55, how does that happen? Chase Elliott pitted lap 19, lap 20, I want to say. And, the pit window was about 33 to 35 laps, I think they were saying, throughout the race. So lap 55 is pushing it. Alan Gustafson, the crew chief for Chase Elliott, told him once that you start to sputter, that first switch, you have 2 switches in the car. You have 2 tanks of, or not 2 tanks of fuel, but the places where the fuel goes into, you have pumps. I think they're pumps. And he said once pump 1 goes off, flip it on to pump 2, you got about 3 laps, I think he said. Well, the pump came on, and Alan Gustafson, all right, 2 more laps. Come at me in 2 more laps. And Chase Elliott ran out of fuel at about the worst spot. He was coming up the S's, and he ran out of fuel. came to a complete stop at the bus stop in the little runoff area, the shortcut, I guess, where you have to do a stop and go, and it caused a caution. Everyone was baffled by this. I'm not an expert. I'm not a crew chief. I'm not a mechanic, an engineer, mathematician, anything like that. But how do you miss it that bad, man? I like Alan Gustafson, man. I do. I know a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't like him. But this is a rough one. It's hard to defend him on this one. It's a miscalculation. It's a mistake, but it is a very bad mistake that was made here. He said 3 laps you can make it. Steve Letarte was saying maybe you can make 3 laps at Charlotte, but at Watkins Glen, no way. Charlotte, of course, a 1.5 mile oval, not shifting during the lap, whereas Watkins Glen, 2.5 mile road course where you're shifting all the time. Like, that's a huge difference in laps, in lap time, and the amount of fuel used. I mean, there was no way, the way Letarte explained it, that they were making it 3 laps on fuel with the reserve. Elliott, realistically, he was not going to win this race. If it went green to the end, he was not going to win this race. The best he could have done was probably 5th, maybe even 6th. Like, he wasn't going to win this thing unless there was a caution. If there's a caution, that completely opens the door to a bunch of other scenarios and what-ifs and whatnot. So realistically, this didn't impact, I mean, it impacted his chances at winning, but he probably wouldn't have been in contention for the win anyways, just because that setback happened on Saturday with the bad qualifying. But at the same time, even if you wanted a chance at the win, that killed it. And that killed any chances at making the playoffs. If you ask me, I really don't think they can get it done next week at Daytona. It's been a disaster of a year for the 9 team, from when Elliott broke his leg in March to the suspension after the Coke 600. And the only time they had winning speed was last week at Indy. Other than that, it's been a disaster. It's just shocking. This year's been shocking for Chase Elliott and the 9 team. It's genuinely shocking. I just can't wrap my head around it. They won the championship in 2020. They won the regular season championship last year, won 5 races last year. Yeah, they have the setback with the Elliott broken leg, but we've seen it happen before where Kyle Busch, he broke his legs in 2015. He was able to come back and win 4 or 5 races that year and win the championship. I'm not saying that I was expecting Elliott to do that, but I would have expected him to win and make it into the playoffs. But, yeah, he's going to have to win at Daytona to make the playoffs. As I said, other than that, uneventful race in terms of cautions, wrecks, whatnot. But outside of that, uneventful race. I mean, other than the last lap crash between Kyle Larson and Austin Dillon, I don't think there was another incident. I think Eric Almirola actually spun once. Other than that, no more incidents. And it was an all right race. I'd honestly say it's a meh race. Last year's race was terrific. You had the rain and whatnot and all the different factors in that race. Whereas this race, look, I'm not saying you got to bring back stage cautions. Do not bring back stage cautions. In fact, take away stage cautions from all races. I've never liked them. I like the idea of stages, rewarding consistency, rewarding being up front for the majority of the race. So that way, if there's a wacky late race restart, you get wrecked, you still get some points to make up for it. But do not take away or do not bring them back just because of one meh road course race. There was some passing, but it was also super difficult to pass. Denny Hamlin held up that second group like the entire race. It was hard to pass. And I'm not saying Hamlin was slow. If he was slow, they would have been able to pass him. But the cars behind him, Bell, Allmendinger, Ty Gibbs, even Kyle Larson there, before Larson got his penalty, they were faster than Denny Hamlin. They just couldn't get by him. They needed a mistake out of him, and Denny Hamlin drove well. So the road courses and short tracks have not been great with this next car. They've been pretty meh, I think. But we do have the occasional really good race with them in the short tracks and short tracks and road courses. Obviously, the intermediates have been great. But anyways, let's get to the results of this race. We had William Byron getting his 5th win of the year. We talked about in his championship case how he needed more playoff points because there's no such thing as too many playoff points. He took that to heart. He gained 6 playoff points today. 1 stage 2, won the race. So big day for him. His first road course race that he's ever won as well. Kyle Larson obviously has a few road course wins. Chase Elliott has a lot of road course wins. But William Byron had never won at a road course, which is a little bit surprising. But at the same time, you look at the best road course performances he's had. I think it was 2019 or 2020. He was on the pole at Sonoma, maybe Watkins Glen as well. And he had the car. He had a car that could have possibly won, but because they were racing for stage points and with the stage cautions, they stayed out, took the track position penalty essentially, and just got the stage points. So they've never really had the opportunity to show that winning speed. But today they had that winning speed. As I said, qualified second, ran up front all race, and won the race comfortably. So really good win for Byron. Great to see the 24 win again as a Jeff Gordon fan. Denny Hamlin finishes second. Still in it in terms of the regular season championship, but I think he's like 40 points back. So he needs Truex to wreck next week, and he has to finish top 5. But other than that, really good run for him. He'll get those playoff points for finishing second in the regular season standings, but really good run for Denny Hamlin. He struggled on the road courses this year. He's qualified well, but then he's crashed or just run poorly. Whereas this weekend, he started on pole, finished second. Good job by Hamlin. Third place, Christopher Bell. Really good race for him. He's a solid road racer. It's not a shock to see him in the top 5 at all. Good race for him. Quietly good race. Fourth place, AJ Allmendinger. He is now in a must-win going into Daytona. Allmendinger ran top 5 all day in this race. Qualified 6th, I think. Ends up finishing 4th. But unfortunately just couldn't make any moves there. Couldn't make any passes. And finishes 4th. Needs a win next week at Daytona. Fifth place, Ty Gibbs technically doesn't need a win at Daytona next week, I believe, but realistically needs a win at Daytona next week to make the playoffs, or needs Bubba Wallace to crash on like lap 1, and he needs to get a lot of stage points. Now, Gibbs had a fantastic race, was up in the top 3 at times, top 5, I think, all 90 laps, honestly. He had a great race. Obviously, heartbreaking what happened to him in the Xfinity race. For Ty Gibbs fans, a lot of people call me Ty Gibbs fans because I said what Sam Mayer did was wrong. But Ty Gibbs, really good race, but unfortunately he's going to need a win next week at Daytona. Sixth place, Martin Truex Jr. was irrelevant until that caution. They had already pitted, were able to stay out, finished 6th. Good for him. Seventh place, Chris Buescher starting up a new road course top 10 streak. Eighth place, Tyler Reddick. Good race for him. Ninth place, Ryan Blaney. 10th place, Joey Logano. 11th place, Todd Gilliland. Really good run for him. He's going to need a win at Daytona next week to make the playoffs. 12th place, Bubba Wallace. What a race for him. Bubba Wallace is a terrible road course racer usually. Usually we see him in the 20s, sometimes the 30s. We see him in the barriers. This week, qualified 12th, scored stage points in both stages, and finished 12th. That's got to be his best road course race to date as a whole. So a really good race for him. He extends his points gap on the playoff bubble. But of course, if there's a new winner next week, he is out. So he's got to watch out for that. 13th, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., solid road course race for him. 14th, Kyle Busch. 15th, Brad Keselowski. We'll talk about him in the playoff bubble here in a minute. 16th, Austin Cindric. 17th, Ryan Preece. 18th, Ross Chastain. 19th, Mike Rockenfeller. Really good run for him to finish top 20 in that legacy car. 20th, Corey LaJoie had top 10 speed in qualifying. Unfortunately, had to drop to the rear, but still top 20. Really good for LaJoie. 21st, Kevin Harvick. We'll talk about him in the playoff bubble. 22nd, Daniel Suarez. Great road course racer. Was in contention for the win at Indy last week. Lap 5 was in the top 10, and he spun. Wrecked himself, and just was never able to recover. They didn't have a ton of damage, but they lost all that track position, had to pit early, and it ruined the race for him. So Daniel Suarez, 22nd, now in a must-win entering Daytona. 23rd, Alex Bowman. 24th, Justin Haley. 25th, Andy Lally. 26th, Kyle Larson was top 5 in this race before a pit road penalty late in this one. And that essentially ruined his race. Difficult to pass, as I said. He finishes 26th. Also wrecked on the last lap. Just sent it in on Austin Dillon and took them both out. I don't know why, but he did. 27th, Josh Bilicki. 28th, Cole Custer. 29th, Eric Jones. 30th, Eric Almirola. 31st, Austin Dillon got right down that last lap. 32nd, Chase Elliott. We talked about it already. Had to win entering this race. Poor qualifying effort. And then somehow, someway, ran out of fuel on lap 55 or whatever lap it was. Mind-boggling, but what a year it's been for Chase Elliott, and I don't mean that in a good way. Has to win at Daytona or he is out of the playoffs for the first time in his career. 33rd, Harrison Burton. 34th, Ty Dillon. 35th, Chase Briscoe was running top 15, but then had like a lug nut that wouldn't come off, so they went down a couple laps and 35th. 36th, Michael McDowell. Top 3 speed once again in a road course. Won stage 1, so they got a playoff point. Good for them. Pit road penalty. Michael McDowell threw too many pit stalls on that first pit stop. Second pit stop, too many men over the wall. And then they had a mechanical failure. So basically the opposite of Indianapolis last week. But let's look at the playoffs now. So, of course, if you have a win, you are in the playoffs. But we have 2 new names who have clinched playoff spots thanks to the repeat winner, William Byron. Brad Keselowski and Kevin Harvick have locked themselves into the playoffs thanks to that repeat winner. So, depending on who wins next week, it can be Chase Elliott, Ty Gibbs, Daniel Suarez. It could be Ty Dillon. It doesn't matter if there's a new winner. Harvick and Keselowski are in on points. They're far enough ahead of Bubba Wallace that if there was a new winner, they'd be above that cut line. And then also the fact that there cannot be more than 16 winners or 15 winners. That means they're both in, or 14 winners, whatever the number is. So they're both in on points. Then we get to that playoff cutoff line. Bubba Wallace plus 32. That is a safe number, usually. However, next week is Daytona. He could crash. There could be a new winner. So while that is a nice points margin, there's just so many factors heading into Daytona next week that I don't think he'll sleep that easy. Now, yes, if Denny Hamlin goes out there and wins, Bubba Wallace will probably point in unless he wrecks on lap 1 and Ty Gibbs runs second the entire race. I personally think Bubba Wallace will get into the playoffs, but you never know. Daniel Suarez technically is still in mathematically points-wise, but I think it's going to take a win out of him. I think it's going to take a win out of anyone. We can talk about this next week, but that is your playoff results. Everyone has to win, in my opinion. There's 2 guys mathematically in it, points-wise. As for the regular season championship, I think Truex essentially has that thing locked up. And we got 2 new playoff guys today, or 2 guys who locked their playoff spot, if you get what I'm saying. But yes, an uneventful Watkins Glen race, but some major playoff implications as we saw. Thanks for watching this video. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. We'll start championship cases up tomorrow. That one's going to come in the afternoon because in the morning I have a spicy bit of NASCAR news for you that came out today. When I say spicy, I mean spicy. I talked about it in the community post a bit already, so go look at that if you haven't already. But yeah, that's all I got for you today. We'll see you for Daytona next week. And then, as I said, championship case tomorrow, which we got the grid up here. I think it's going to be, the next one is going to be Tyler Reddick, I believe. So yeah, thanks again for watching.